Okay, that's okay. I look appropriate. There we
You
go.
you look great, man.
Thanks. It's been a long Netflix is a joke festival. So I was partying last night. I had my big headlining show last night, and I was at the Tom Brady roast. We were over. I mean, you name it. I was at the Matt Rife Hollywood Bowl. Like we hit everything, pop-ins, and then my big show was last night. So I'm running on fumes, but I'm here for you guys.
I love it. It's funny because I feel like comedy's getting this weird resurgence right now with partly because of Netflix, but it was almost like, I mean, you could correct me, but I almost feel like it happened when Will Smith slapped Chris Rock and Chris Rock got that special, and now everyone's just killing it with Netflix specials.
I think that you're right. I think that that was a major turning of the corner. I also think that we just got to a place, I think, as a society where you just started feeling people saying, like, there's so much negative and pushback in the world. The one thing we should allow to not have any restriction is comedy, right? You can't
Yes,
police comedy.
100%.
And so it has since that moment, I feel like. But this week, I'll tell you, man, I went to that Tom Brady roast. I sat there with my wife for 3 hours and I turned to her at a certain point and I said, comedy right now is back bigger than ever before,
Hmm.
bigger than anything we could have imagined because that roast was so raw and live, not edited and fixed or curated. That was 3 hours of, I don't know if you'll ever hear something live like that for 3 hours again.
Yeah,
It was amazing.
it was fantastic. Who was your favorite on the show? Who do you think maybe not stole the show, but surprised people the most?
Everybody knows Nikki Glazer took it to a whole nother level. And I went back and watched it after being, there. And she really went like 20 for 20. I don't think she had one bit that missed. But sitting there, it was like Tony rocked. I
I
mean,
loved
Hinchcliffe took
him.
it to another level. Another
I
level.
he was I was telling my friends about it because I said, roasts were like, I mean, back in the day before my time, roasts were a thing, but then like in like the early 2000s they came back pretty good, and he reminded me of I would say Lisa Lampanelli from back in those days,
Right.
Greg Giraldo, who was the man. I love
The
that
best.
dude. They were
Yeah,
so good.
it was like Nikki was certainly a standout. The whole night was amazing, but I'll tell you who really blew me away, and we hung out backstage probably for about 30 minutes was Drew Bledsoe.
Really?
Dude, Drew Bledsoe crushed that. He had a vibe. He kind of had like an old Dean Martin kind of thing, and he had his drink, and he was so smooth and like nonchalant. But if you go back and watch his set, like I told him I'm casting a film right now.
Mhm.
I'm going to try to put Drew Bledsoe in this comedy film that I'm producing. He rocked, and he's one of the nicest, coolest guys. He used to come see me at the Faneuil Hall Comedy Connection, him and the boys.
Yeah.
And I can say this now, but they used to have a few too many drinks before practice day. But they were always there, man. During my heyday at the Comedy Connection, Bledsoe and the gang were there, and it was nice to be able to not only see him have a moment like that. He looks amazing. Dude, he looks so good. He looked handsome, and I was like, I think Drew Bledsoe, outside of the comics that I love, to me, he was the standout of the night.
Okay, I like. Okay, so let's go back to your story now because you were talking about doing Faneuil Hall, because this podcast. I kind of want to get people's story, kind of from the beginning, how they got into what they did, and like the ups and downs. Because everybody has. I think a lot of people look at people's lives and careers and they think it's this kind of climb, but there's a lot of ups and downs, and times where
Right.
you kind of make sacrifices, and well, sometimes people go a little too far professional, it messes up their personal, or vice versa. So you were born in Cambridge. Is that where you were born originally?
Yeah, born in Cambridge, raised in Arlington.
Okay. And at what point in your life did you want to do comedy?
Like 12 years old, watching Saturday Night Live, probably in like sixth or seventh grade, and realizing like, okay, wait a second, at home, I'm all over the place. I'm doing skits. I'm like bothering the neighbors. I'm always trying to do something entertaining or pranking or singing or what. I'm just trying to do something to ham it up. So I see Saturday Night Live, and I think I went to my mom that next day and said, "That's it. This is what I know what I want to be." And I was like, "I'm going to be a clown." I
And
knew, so that was it.
was she cool with it, or was she like, maybe you should
Totally.
go to school?
Nope.
Really?
No, she knew. I said, I'm not going to college. I told her in eighth grade, I said, I'm not going to college. You know that, right? I'm going to pound the pavement, and I'm going to do open mics. And she was my number one champion, man. She was like, go for it. And plus, she had like a truck driver's sense of humor. My mom too,
Yeah.
and she was kind of a ham. So I think vicariously living through me, she was like, I think you can do this. And I think secretly, my mom would come to the Faneuil Hall, have a couple of Kahlua sombreros. She'd be heckling me with funnier shit than I was even saying.
Oh, that's funny.
So it was the perfect mom, son relationship, because she just told me, go for it. But she did say, she goes, but don't take it halfway. Don't be one of those kind of sort of funny guys that is not the headliner. She's like, please take this to the top. And I was like, okay, that's the promise. I'll do it. You support me and I'll take it as far as I can.
Where was your first, not headline, like what was the first open mic that you did?
Oh, there was a place in Cambridge called Catch a Rising Star,
Yep.
right outside of Harvard Square. And they used to have their version of an open mic.
Uh-huh.
And I went down there and I signed up for it. They didn't pick me, but they picked somebody else named Ernest Glenn. And when they called the name, he didn't show up, but nobody knew who he was because nobody knew any of us. So I put my hand up, and the host goes, he's looking at his list, and he goes, wait, you're Ernest Glenn? And I'm like, yeah. And so my first 5 minutes ever, he goes, all right, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome all the way from the fifth row, Ernest Glenn. I got up from the fifth row, went up, and changed my life. Because Ernest Glenn didn't show, I got my first set ever and never stopped.
Well, big shout out to Ernest Glenn, wherever you are now. Dane has his career.
When I check into hotels, that's the name that I go under.
Oh, that's funny. So wait, so is that how you do it? You go to the place and you sign your name and hope that they call you?
It used to be, because the trick there was they had people come down, sign up, and then you would go the next week. You'd bring your friends or family, somebody who wanted you to get picked, and that gave them an audience to buy drinks and get chicken wings or whatever.
Yeah.
So you didn't know if you were going to get up. You would go and watch, and they'd pick 8 names of the 20 that signed up, but the 20 that signed up would bring people. So it was kind of a smart way to get a crowd in there.
I like that. And Boston, this was like in the 90s, right?
Oh yeah, this was like May of 1990, but it was also at a time when then I start hanging out at the clubs, and I'm hanging out downtown at all the different comedy stomping grounds, and I'm quickly realizing, and I'm being told by all the epic headliners, that the big 80s boom, like the Robin Williams, the Mork and Mindy's, and Seinfeld on Carson, just, like, it was over. The comedy was considered over in 1990. Comedy as we knew it had hit like this upper echelon, and even though Comedy Central was there, Comedy Central was kind of cheesy, man. Comedy Central was putting on people that were like wearing like weird sweaters and had like funny jokes about cats, and there was really no teeth. And so everybody in the comedy business was like, hey, enjoy it while it's still here, but this is probably all going to wrap up really soon. And who would have known that stand-up comedy would then become like an industry that now Netflix builds a festival around?
Yeah, it's almost like you do the comedy thing, and then for a while it was you were a stand-up comedian, got your own TV show, or stand-up comedian. Well, actually, I wouldn't even say got into movies, but you're one of the few guys that like was a stand-up comedian that became a leading man in movies. But you were the first guy really who social media. Who utilized social. Actually, you know what? Before I get to that, I gotta tell you a funny story.
Yeah.
So
Go for it.
you probably don't even remember this. This was 2000. My old producer reminded me of this because I told him I was going to talk to you, and he said in the early 2000s at my old radio station, we had you come in as a guest, and I said, really? And he said, yeah. He goes, you probably don't remember, because at the same time his uncle was opening a barbecue restaurant, and we had the uncle on. We had a tent set up outside, and we were eating barbecue. So we spent the 4 hours of the show talking about how great this barbecue is. And by the way, we have Dane Cook in studio right now. You probably don't even remember that because I barely remember. I'm like, are you sure that was Dane? He goes, I'm positive it was Dane. Does that
I just know this. There was a lot of appearances early in my career where, yes, there was like an animal wrangler on with you or something, and you were just, second banana. So I believe it. I probably was featuring for barbecue at that point.
He said that he goes, I remember Dane really enjoyed the barbecue too. I'm like, okay, if you say so.
I love a good barbecue. Yeah, I love a good barbecue. I probably didn't mind because, full disclosure, like even when everything started really breaking through, I hated talking in interviews. I used to be like I still have some, not social anxiety, but I'm an introvert naturally. But back then, I didn't want to do any of that shit. I was like, I only want to make it from what I do on stage. And I didn't want to play the game at all because I was truly like apprehensive about even speaking in public. So if everybody was sitting there eating barbecue, trust me, I wasn't like, why isn't this about me? I was like, let's eat dessert next and then get me out of here.
That's funny. So, okay. So now you were the first guy to really utilize social media to freaking blow up, and that started with MySpace.
That's right. Yeah, MySpace was like TikTok 1.0 back in the day, and I remember getting on there. And after I've been in Hollywood for probably 2 or 3 years, and realized pretty quickly like this industry didn't give, they didn't even look my way. I kind of thought I was like, I'm this young college act. I'm going to come to Hollywood and I'm just going to make it in a day. And to be honest, it was almost like a rude awakening. I got here. I'm just sitting around for 3 years. Couldn't get meetings. Couldn't get any attention. Was only making a little bit of scratch on the road. And then finally one day, I'm eating Fruit Loops. I'm sitting in ripped sweatpants in an apartment I truly can't afford. I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to, exist out here. And I got online. I see this MySpace thing. And I sign up, and I'm like, okay, you post, and it's kind of like a little window to the world. And then I had 2 college gigs that week, and I went, and at the end of each show, I go, you guys have this thing, MySpace? And like 4 people were like, I go, all right, well, I'm on there. And within a week, I had, I don't know, I want to say like 2,300 followers. And I posted something in that first 2 weeks, like a clip, a wave file. Let's really go back to like early jargon, like a wave file of my stand-up. I got 10,000 followers, and I was sitting there the day I hit 10,000. My neighbor Richard, who's still to this day my best friend, he's like my brother. He walked into my office as I'm sitting there, probably still eating Fruit Loops because all I could afford was cereal and the same sweatpants I was wearing. And he goes, D. He calls me. He goes, D. What are you doing? Am I allowed to swear on this, or should I
go
not?
ahead. No, you can swear. It's cool.
He goes, D. What are you doing? And I go, I took a bite, and I go, I'm building a fucking empire. And I knew. I literally knew I'm gonna win. I'm the winner of comedy. I knew. Yeah. I was like, I didn't even hide it. I'd go to the club every night. I'd be like, I'm on this thing, MySpace, and if you're not on it, I'm gonna leave all of you motherfuckers in the dust because this is how to promote. This is how to find your fans. And I was getting hit up from Brazil, and I was getting hit up from Canada, and I was people in London, people travel. All of a sudden, I built up this digital street team, and I knew it, man. I knew that it was that was going to be a game changer, and it was
way ahead of the game. So, what were other comedians saying? Were they kind of like, nah, man, that's not going to work?
Yeah, a lot of them said it was a fad, or like the internet was just, it was slow. I mean, the internet was still pretty slow. It wasn't like Wi-Fi or high speed. I think a lot of the guy comics changed their mind once they saw some of the pretty girls that were writing me and asking, where the show was, where the after party is. So that certainly changed some of the male perspective in comedy. But truth be told, a lot of comics in that era, I was very entrepreneurial, and I was business minded, and I loved to promote, and I enjoyed that as much as I loved performing. The comics of that era, they were still very much into partying. they were not into the idea of what was at that point called people thought I was pandering. There were certain comics that was like, he panders, and I'm like, they don't get it that this is the new media.
Yeah.
This is the new way to communicate. We're all going to be doing this. And I was just fortunate enough to be a big enough nerd at that time to know computers and internet were gonna be the way that we build our foundations.
And it's crazy because you used to actually respond one-on-one to people too, right?
I would respond to everybody. I mean, I responded all day, every day. And here's how maniacally organized I was. I have a hard drive right now in my office. I took a screenshot after every conversation. So I have every chat that I've ever had with anybody on MySpace. If you talk to me on MySpace back in the day, I can search that hard drive. I will find our correspondence. I have it.
That is hilarious. That's like
Yeah, I
receipts.
have hundreds of thousands of yeah, everything. I have every fan photo ever sent. I have every correspondence. The stuff that I treasure, all the military personnel while they were over in Iraq at the time when they were allowed internet access. That was like a new thing where they could talk to their families, and a lot of them I would send care pack CDs. I would send my comedy, and
Yeah.
they would write me. So I have all these beautiful conversations with our military personnel. I'm talking to people across the world, making them laugh, trying to raise their spirits, get home. And so it was a golden era for me because I was putting myself on the map that nobody really wanted me. Nobody wanted me on that map. So I made a map and put myself on it. But then 2 years later, I hit one button, one post on MySpace, and I sold out 2 shows at Madison Square Garden like that, and Boston Garden. 2 shows at Boston Garden for Vicious Circle, 2 shows at Madison Square Garden. I didn't buy any promotion. There was no local ads. It was watch this, click, and then 2 hours later they called me and said, you sold out 40,000 seats at both locations.
That's insane. It's crazy to think about because now social media is such a thing, but even though it's a thing now, it's not. People like to pretend that it's like this personal connection with their fans, but no one's going back and forth with their fans like you are. Maybe on Twitter every now and then if somebody pisses them off, but
Sure.
other than that,
Yeah, it wasn't a hater era. It was still at a time when people didn't even know how to say something that was really intense. It was like every once in a while. There was like a 5-year period where it was the Wild West because there was no algorithm. So everything you put out there hit. If it was good, it hit. You didn't have to boost to pay. Like now you get a boost to pay. You can buy
Right.
followers. I know a lot of people whose followers aren't even really bots. There was no bots.
Yeah.
There was just if it's good and it hit it and it goes out, it's gonna find people. And you would watch one comedy clip in real time, and you knew like, wow, this every IP address that comes back to me, there's a real person, online right now. It was awesome, and not to say it isn't today, and that the comics today are some of the most business minded. I think they're some of the smartest and funniest this era that we're in right now. I think some of the funniest and smartest entrepreneurial comics podcasters are right now. But for me in that time, it was like there was nothing stopping the army that I was moving forward with because no corporation controlled the algorithm.
Right. And there's something to be said with doing something that no one has done before. So a lot of times, like now, if you're starting out in comedy now, you're gonna go, okay, well, what's this person doing? Okay, they got an Instagram. They're putting clips of their shows on. They're saying this. You didn't have any of that. You were just like, let me hit this and see if it works. Great. If it doesn't work, I won't do it again.
Yeah, it was really like it was two things. It was if it's funny, it'll play. I believe funny beats everything. If something's funny, it will find its way forward. But also that idea of correspondence with somebody that people saw on whatever Comedy Central or on TV, it was just so new. It was so weird to go like, oh, I'm in Delaware, and this comedian that I watched on Comedy Central last night is writing me, is sending. I would send voice waves. Hey, it's really me. I would call people. I'd say, send me your. I'd literally call people and be like, I saw your message. You're stupid enough to leave your phone number on my main page. And I mean, I will tell you, it was 4 years of absolute 100% reveling, loving my life in business. No backlash, no coming down the first hill, which, is, it's coming. The
Yeah.
spanking machine is going to get. I knew. I was like, nobody gets out alive. But for those 4 years, I really, ruled the roost. And it was funny. I was with Ted Sarandos at the, who owns Netflix.
Yeah.
I was with him and his son, and we were all at the roast, and they were kind of giving me my flowers and thanks for being a part of the festival. And, a lot of us are, here because of the early strides that you made. And I leaned in and I said, there's a few things coming down the pipeline that I'm aware of, and you might want to give me a buzz because I'm always seeing the next trend in terms
Yeah.
of tech. And so they were like, "Oh, seriously?" And I was like, "Yeah, you guys. There's a few adjustments that need to be made if you guys want to continue to permeate."
Wow. It's funny because I feel like, okay, so you were a pioneer with social media, and you were also basically you were the first cameo calling people and leaving them messages. That's
Yeah,
so
the
funny.
first cameo, but the currency was they gave me people would hear me out and then they would give you a shot and go, you know what? This person wrote me back and was nice enough to reply to my silly message or whatever they were saying. He's coming through town. I'll give it a look. And my fan base today is now when I do my meet and greet, the college kids that I came up with, my generation, they're coming out with their family. Their kid that saw me an employee of the month at 12
Yep.
is now, 22. So I've got a whole new fan base that's been opening up. And the next film that we're working on now, it really caters to not only the fans that I grew up with, but now I know how to kind of figure out what I want to be speaking to that next generation. So it's dude, it's been an awesome time, and I've said this in my career a couple of times. I've said the opposite a couple of times, but I've never been happier. And this is one of those moments where, when you hit a down and out moment, when you hit the skids, when something doesn't work, there's no greater feeling than getting back on stage, try to figure out what's funny, and then finding yourself at the Netflix festival, with some of your favorite comics that are also your friends.
Yeah, it's funny. I always try and explain it to people. I said, you got to look at whatever it is, your career, your life. A lot of people, especially now with who just grew up with social media stuff and people just kind of coming out of nowhere. I said, that's not how life is. Those people are going 0 to 10. The way life really works is you go 0 to 1 to 2, back to 1, 2, 3, 4, back to 2, 3, 4, back to 1, 2, 3,
Yeah.
4, like that. But the good thing about that is when you get, when you get to an 8 or 9, like you said, a down part's going to come. But when you fall back down to 5 or 6, okay, I've been here before. I know what to do to get back up. Whereas a lot of people now on social media, they go 0 to 10. They've never been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9. So if they fall back a step, it's like falling off a cliff.
Yeah, things do happen. You're right, man. And you know what? Things not only happen instantaneously, so really add one number into your equation, because even though it kind of used to be like, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2. Now sometimes what happens is it goes like 1, 2 step, and then you're at 10, because the algorithm now, if you get juiced, it hits everybody. And then very quickly you got to figure out, okay, how do I please everybody all at once?
Mm-hmm.
Because then you can go from 10 right back down to a 2. Who's that? There's the girl on TikTok. She was a huge hit, Bobby something.
Oh,
Bobby Alta.
the girl, yes, the one who's the thing with Drake, that she got in a bed with Drake and did interview him there.
She went from being what I thought for a minute. She came out of nowhere. Then all of a sudden she was like the biggest interviewer, podcaster, like what felt like in the world. They played her up, played her up. Then all of a sudden she was like too cool for school, almost like not 2 years later, 2 months later. Then she was going to premieres and stuff. And it felt like the whole internet was like, nah, what else?
Right. Exactly.
That's
I think
crazy. She went from 1 to 10 to I don't know. I don't know. Maybe she's working on a TV show or a sitcom or I don't know what, but that's how quickly now you got to be ready to go, hey man, this isn't going to settle and slowly build. This is going to pop, then it's going to deflate, and I got to be ready to get another pop.
I think a lot of that comes from people, you'll ask people of a certain generation, what do you want to do? And they say, oh, I want to be a social media influencer. And it's like, okay, but what do you want to do? Like, you need to have a passion of something that you love the process of doing. Because if you just want to be like, I want everyone to know who I am, it's like, okay, how? Doing what?
You know what that reminds me of? That reminds me of like back in the early 1800s when everybody probably thought they could be a gold miner. Everybody was going to either up towards Nova Scotia or out to California because everybody thought they were going to get their screen and they were going to get nuggets of gold and be everybody the gold rush. And kind of feels like everybody's doing that now with either podcasting or influencing or whatever they think they're going to present. That, oh, that's it, if I hit there. But the sad reality is everything is hard work. There is no pass. And if you see somebody who looks like, man, wow, they got the golden horseshoe up their butt and suddenly they're in the fast lane, you should pray for that person. You don't want that fast lane.
You don't, because
you don't want it.
It'll mentally fuck with you once you fall back, because then you're like, I just hit a home run and now I'm coming up and I don't know how to hit a single, or I don't know how to bunt. I can't get on base. I always do sports analogies. Sorry.
My dad was. I do the same thing. My dad. One of my early jokes in my career, I said my dad would use sports analogies for everything to the point where it would drive me crazy. He'd say, like, if I wanted to talk to a girl, he would pull a badminton reference. He'd be like, "You got to shuttlecock yourself over there and talk to that girl." Like, so we're speaking the same language. But to kind of wrap that all up, it's like I think anything good in this world, even in this instantaneous media, is come up with formulate a plot, really work it out, detail your roadmap, and before you hit that go live, don't just have one or two things that you want to connect with people. Have an agenda, have a short and a long-term plan, because you might rocket to the moon, and guess what? You might get there and then go, how do I get back?
Right.
I don't even know. I can't even breathe up here. I don't know. So it's all about game plan and execution.
Yeah. You know what's funny too? Another thing that you were the pioneer for, you probably don't even, well, no, I'm sure you've heard it. So you know how
getting so many props today.
No,
I love
dude,
it, pioneer.
Because it's funny. I told my wife I was gonna talk to you, and she's like, "Oh my god!" She's not like a comedy person, but she loved you because she was in your wheelhouse when you were blowing up. College age, all that stuff.
Right.
But she's like, you need to let him know that all this shit where people are calling, the short-haired middle-aged woman Karen came from his skit back in the day, where you were like, everybody hates Karen, nobody likes a Karen.
Yeah, Karen was the person in my bit about if you ever want to know the friend that nobody likes, if there's a group of people taking a picture and you don't know who's going to take it, the punchline was, Karen, here, you take it. And it was always Karen who you wanted out of the photo to take it. So that was the first time. And then I used to use the name Karen. And the truth is this: the reason Karen became my punchline in that era was because in comedy, K words, the K sound and the B sound is very funny. So I came up with a name like Debbie. But Care being like, all right, Care, like the K sound was a funnier tone to it.
What made you go, because you also were kind of the first comedian to cater more to a college age female type of audience?
Yeah.
So did you do that intentionally, or did it kind of, when you hit a couple of jokes that hit with that audience, were you like, let me stick with this?
Well, like being in New England, we have a school, you can like bump your elbows into two different university and community college. Like you can kind of so there's plenty of places, and at that point that was just a route to make a little scratch. You could do, like, they had an entertainment budget, so they'd bring in a band and a comic and a magician, and so I just got on the New England circuit of schools. But what I learned pretty quickly was I was like, oh wow, okay, I'm of this age, and so they would hire other comics that might have been kind of sort of known in the 80s or late 70s, and they just weren't connecting, and I was speaking the language, right? I knew what they were doing and what they wanted to really be talking about. But as that started, so I started doing that early in my career, and then once I got on TV, it was they were the ones hiring. So the money you could make, man, the money that I was pulling in weekly for doing college gigs was, I mean, it hit a certain point where I was like, I don't care about movies or anything else. I'm just going to stay on this college. This is it. This is
Yeah.
so lucrative. So it was lucrative and then fun because the after party was literally with like the girls that I would want to hang with and get to know. It was like I'm the show, and now
Yeah.
I get to hang out after and enjoy the fruits of my labor.
Right, right. And all the guys trying to get with the girls, and they're like, "Excuse me, Dane's right there." And by the way, he answered my he answered my message on MySpace. So we're boys
Well,
and girls.
it was great because and then the guys would be there because the guys knew. Well, it was also like there was a familiarity with me, but also the guys knew that the girls like my show, so the guys want to be where the girls are. So I felt like I was hitting every quadrant, and that's all just that was lady luck. I was like, I'm the right age, and guys and girls like me for whatever reason. So I was not complaining. It was a blast.
Nice. So then you got your movies. That not then was it that all of a sudden Hollywood start calling you, or they were
Yeah, I
like,
started getting well, Hollywood. It's kind of funny. Like I told you guys honestly, like when I got here, Hollywood was like, we have Jim Carrey's, we have Robin Williams, we already have our energetic comics, and it's a very short-sighted industry, and it's brutal, to be honest with you. Anything you do in Hollywood usually comes from something that like you rattle the cage. The cage rarely ever opens and says, "Come on inside. We want you to play in the on the lot with everybody." And so, feeling left out, what I started doing was becoming friends with producers and directors that were just coming to my show, and they were new. So somebody come up to me and go, "Hey, man, I'm a fan." I go, "What do you do?" I'm a director. I came out of USC, or I'm doing a film. I'm a short film. So I started coming up then with directors, and by the time I got Employee of the Month, I'd done a few films before that, like cameo type things. But my first leading man role was with a guy, Greg Coolidge, who's a good friend of mine to this day. We're actually working on something again right now. But he came up with me, so he cast me when other people at Lionsgate might have been like, really? He's your first choice? Why don't we go after maybe at that point like Chris Evans had done like some, there was already guys ahead of me that were on what they call the short list.
yeah.
And I just got lucky because I came up with directors and producers and other actors that, we hung out. We liked each other.
Are you a reader?
Yeah. Yeah. I love to read.
Do you ever read Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell?
No, I've not read that.
Okay, you got to read that book because everything you're saying right now kind of that's one of those books whenever people say if you could give somebody a book, I'm like Outliers. It's awesome. And
Yeah, I've heard of this book.
so it's basically, when you look at somebody who's really successful at what they do, let's just throw LeBron James out there. A lot of times people just do the throwaway of, well, he's just awesome at basketball. He wakes up and he's just awesome. And they don't realize everything that led up to that person, getting to that awesome, they call it the 10,000 hour rule, basically. Yeah, the plateau. So,
Yeah.
and a lot of it has to do with obviously, not just what they got into and how much they practiced it. That's almost the obvious, but then it goes even to where they were born, what year they were born, and how certain things matched up, and how you're saying right now you matched up with you doing comedy at a certain age for a certain audience that wasn't getting served. That's one. Then in Hollywood, you started rising with all these people that were rising at the same time. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like you should be a chapter in that book.
Oh man. Well, Ramiro, I'll tell you this, man. Like there was I try to like I do some I've been starting to do like, I guess you call it like a seminar circuit where I go out and I talk about like my philosophy and ways to live your life, but also like cultivate your career. And because I love it, I love talking shop. I could talk to you for another hour. It's like I like helping other people try to figure out that equation. And one thing that speaking to Outliers, or this all things numerology and timing and zeitgeisting, there was the week of my life when I released my second comedy album, Retaliation. Leading up to that, there wasn't a single publication that wanted to write about me. Rolling Stone and Spin and 20 other newspapers. Nobody wanted to have a story about me. Nobody wanted to help that. It was my sophomore effort. And I was the lowest I'd ever been. Like, I thought that I was about to exceed my expectations, finally putting out an album that really like could potentially make an impact. I was really low. I was really bummed out. I was like, man, like, am I ever going to feel like I'm part of the community? Am I ever going to feel like I'm in? And the only thing that to this day I can look at as what made the game change for me was the audience cared. And the audience that I'd been communicating with for, I guess at that point, 12 or 13 years, they bought the album, and they bought so many albums that first week. I think it was over 100,000 sold the first week, units sold of the CD, that all those publications, almost every single one, the week after, all called.
Yeah.
Everybody. They called. The same ones that were like, not interested. No. The Rolling Stones and the Spins, they all called. And over maybe a 2 or 3 week period, I got to see a real window into like what life truly is all about. And really, the only thing that matters to anybody listening, focus on your client, focus on your audience. Because if you focus on why aren't I getting the press, and why aren't I getting the zeitgeist, and why aren't I getting the feedback, you're gonna capsize yourself. You're gonna depress yourself like it depressed me. And the only thing that matters, if you're a comedian, is this sound and laughter, and let all that other stuff happen when it's going to. Because if you think that ship's coming in just for you, it ain't.
Yeah. And a lot of that connection is how you did it. You make it one-on-one. I always tell people, I said, think of it this way. Sometimes I'm going to go back to sports analogies. You will meet the best player on a team, and he might be having a bad day, or maybe he's just a dick, but he's kind of a dick to you. All of a sudden, even though he's the best player on the team, you're kind of like, I don't like him as much as I liked him before I met him. But but to the same point, sometimes the Red Sox, or they'll send sometimes a utility guy to an appearance at Dick's Sporting Goods, and you go and you meet him, and for some reason he's really personable, and he's just super nice to you, and you leave with a really great impression. Even though that dude sucks, all of a sudden he's your favorite player on the team. And it comes to that personal one-on-one connection, which is what you built it with.
It's you're spot on, man. It's like they call that like synergy. And when you treat people with a certain kind of I don't want to say respect, because it's not like you got to go in and dance the dance. I think what a lot of people respond to is just, if there's a personal connection and you're just doing your way, like organically, I think people respect realness even more than the talent or whatever it is that you put to. That's how a politician changes your mind. That's how a politician that you're like, I don't believe in their platform. And then you meet them and they're going to say to you, listen, I know I'm not going to get your vote, but let me just answer 2 questions for you. I know I'm not going to get your vote, but let me just point 2 things out. You've changed somebody's mentality. They're going to give you a shot. They're going to look at you differently. So you nailed it. And then what I'm tagging on there, and for anybody listening, is just like, do everything you can to remove any bullshit. Don't think you gotta fake it till you make. You gotta put on, like, I gotta put on my game face. Look at somebody like Bill Burr, who walked into Philly and just that night changed his career because he just allowed himself to be like, you know what, screw you guys. And then he hammered him. He could have put on a game face and be like, no, guys, no, listen to my act, or blah, blah, blah. No, he did the thing that people responded to, which is he showed who he truly is. And if you put who you really are into your product,
that's so true.
You're only going to move forward. You're only going to move ahead.
Okay, so now let's go to Hollywood. You're in Hollywood. You're like the guy. One thing I always like, I like to notice patterns in life. And one thing I always notice in Hollywood is everybody will have their, I'd say, 3 to 5 year stretch where they are in everything and they're killing it. And then it kind of, they start, some people just disappear, but some other people, it's more like they fade away. And you can see some of the people who handle that the right way. and other ones who they almost like they were like, oh, I'm gonna be doing this for the rest of my life, and then they can't get back on it. So when you first got into it, were you thinking like, oh, I'm gonna be a Hollywood superstar forever, or did you kind of go, okay, I know I'm gonna get a good amount of time doing this. Let me see how I can capitalize on it.
It's a question. I don't know if anybody's ever asked me this kind of question this way, and that's interesting because I'll tell you, so I grew up watching comics that I loved that went into film, whether that was like Steve Martin, Father of the Bride kind of stuff, or Robin Williams, who'd done drama, World According to Garp, or Dead Poet Society. Yeah, a lot. I was already loving the idea of performance. I loved film, but I knew that comedy was my, at this kind of the center of my heart. And so, yes, I'm watching those guys, but I'd watched Eddie Murphy's career, and I saw, oh, you can be as big as Eddie Murphy and Beverly Hills Cop and all, and then you can make, some movies like Pluto Nash or something that like everybody says you fell off and Eddie Murphy's done, and then they kind of like write your obituary. And I'd been studying the greats and looking and going, okay, while I have my opportunity, I got to hopefully get some good scripts, get some decent offers, be good in them. But I already saw the writing on the wall, which is like, you have your stretch, and then you have to grow with your audience again. And I don't know how that really translates always in film, but for me, what it meant was that I'm only going to be the young, edgy, single bachelor kind of guy for a short period of time. So I made like 8 films that played into my stand-up, but also that energy. At the end of that run, when it was coming to the end of Best Friend's Girl, I remember I turned down a movie that I'm actually still to this day bummed. I turned down The Proposal with Sandra Bullock.
No way.
Yeah. I turned that down because I had just come to the end of this run where I was like, I don't think I'm this rom-com guy anymore. I think I'm aging out a little bit. I think that I also, need to get back into my stand-up and reconnect with that fan base. But I also saw that comedy by 2010, it was getting to that PC cult. That was the beginning of the PC culture kind of shutting comedy down. And if you think about comedy from 2010 to recently, it sucked. It was very watered down. A lot of those movies, even my last one that I did, it didn't do as good as the others. It did well. The one we shot in Boston, it was like it did well, but they were already starting to dampen our comedies because a lot of them really sucked and didn't even make any box office. So I was looking at like, okay, this is the end of my run now. I got to kind of change where I'm at, but I also saw the industry changing, and then it just was. I was getting scripts in 2011, 12, 13. I was like, I'm not doing this because this is worse than anything I've done, whether people liked it or not. But I was like, I could say yes to this and, grab the bag and go, or I could just stay and do my stand-up and wait for either trends to change or for me to come up with something, or for a number of reasons. There was a good era where comedy was great and beloved, and then comedy wasn't. So I think I got to enjoy and have enough success in my moment, but I also feel like I got out with how can I say it? Like I got out with feeling like, you know what, I didn't go down with the comedy ship, and I felt like some people I won't name.
Yeah.
Their careers kind of sank because they were trying to do things that just weren't going to be box office successes. So I got pretty lucky. I had a good run in that moment, being I couldn't believe I was leading man. I had a big fat Irish head. I had acne scars. I don't know, man. I was kind of blown away that I even got to do what I did. But once I was there and learned producing, and then learned how to be behind the camera, and now I've directed and I'm producing this next big comedy that I'm also starring in. Like, I got to learn so much just being on sets and being around Kevin Costner's and being around like some of the great, John Lasseter, working with him at Disney, and, creating planes. And I got to be in places where maybe people don't even realize I was, and just watch and learn and be impressed with some of the, the gatekeepers that were around me.
Yeah, you did. I'm gonna hit you with another sports analogy. A lot of times when an athlete retires, people nobody ever retires at the perfect time. Do you ever notice that? They always retire a season too late, or oh man, he had another season in him. You did you had another season in you, so you got out right before you had that 8 and 9 season like Tom Brady.
I did, but I also saw the writing on the wall, because when we put out Best Friends Girl, and you can't, like, some people will go like, oh, but that's the marketing department. Like, the truth is, you know that nothing is forever, and you got to, new seasons. I kind of looked and was like, once Best Friends Girl came out, and it was like everything else that I did, nothing was ever a Sandler. I never had 100 million out of the gate home run, but I was always hitting like triples. But that was a double. And I was like, ooh, I got to be a little more selective. And I also think that we're coming out of the early aughts era of that kind of comedy. And every decade something new is going to start. So I didn't get my ass handed to me. I kind of just took my own ass and slowly walked away.
It's so funny you say, because it's so true. Like the 2010s was a weird, all of a sudden people were complaining about comedy, which, by the way, I never understood. I've always been of the opinion that if you don't like something, don't consume it. It's that easy. If you don't like a show, I'm not a Kardashian guy, but I can't say I hate the show because I've never really seen it. The times I've seen little pieces, I'm like, not my thing. I just won't watch it. I'm not gonna tell everyone not to watch it. I'm not gonna say it shouldn't be on the air.
Right.
But that's what people did with comedians, which is crazy because.
But can I add something into that too?
Yeah.
Let me just add something, which is the whole 2010s era, without getting too into the weeds, like media, and there's some people in the industry that kind of dictate what is going to be in vogue, whether that's a cultural in vogue, whether that's an attitude in vogue, whether that's we're coming at a political narrative. And so it was the era of beta men, okay? Beta men. It was either guys that were really fragile. There was no alpha in 2010. It was a lot of incredibly gifted female, comedies and stuff. So it really was an incredible era, I think, for women across the board in diversity. But it was the worst era for guys. And I'll tell you what just happened about 2 weeks ago. I can't say who, but a very, very powerful industry figure who helps to curate the machine and kind of like create the new season of fashion, let's just say. This person came into the meeting with other creative types. I'm keeping this a little benign, a little beige. And a good friend of mine who was at that meeting came to me and he goes, "You'll never believe what they said in this meeting about the next era of Hollywood or where we're at." And I go, "What?" And the person running this meeting literally came in and put their fist and went, "Men are back." Men are back, meaning you're going to start seeing more rough, tough, like guys being fucking guys is now being allowed back into the mainstream. Believe it or not, if you look at the last 10 years, it was very beta.
Yeah.
It was very gentle. And,
yes.
And the quote is, "Men are back." You're going to see the Burt Reynolds. You're going to see the, guys that don't always look so. There's going to be a little bit of edge. Might be some dark circles under their eyes. Like, you're going to see the fellas are going to be back in full form in film and TV.
I love it. Well, because the thing I was saying about comedy is that to go see a stand-up show, it's disposable income. One, you're doing a lot of steps to go see this show. So
right.
If it's easy to avoid it if it's not your thing. And I never understood when I would hear those stories about people getting up and saying that joke was insensitive, or how could you say anything about, and leaving like they were mad because you. I just don't get it. It just have you ever had that happen?
And then wanting to end your career,
yes.
career because they don't like what you said, which if you took that at the reverse and let's say that person ran a restaurant, that would be the equivalent of like you and I getting online and saying, uh, "We this deli is the worst food I've
Right.
ever had, and it should be closed."
No.
Like,
You say that was a shitty sandwich. I'm not going to eat there again.
I'm not going to eat there again. I'll find a place that I like to eat. But for a while, it really was like, people felt personally attacked. But listen, everything's so subjective in comedy. You can find a way to take it personal. If you knew somebody who died of a terrible disease and that comic talks about that disease, one person's in the crowd going, "Oh, I needed to laugh at this, it was time," and the other
Right.
person's like, "Too soon for me." It's like, it's such bullshit. It's a lot of hogwash. And the fact that comedy, in what I've seen at the Netflix is a Joke Festival, the comedy I've witnessed, the comedy I've gotten to really perform, everybody's back in that place of like, if you don't like it, I don't think anybody's going to get canceled anymore. So nobody's as scared as they
Right.
were a couple of years ago to just go up there and tell their story in their way.
Right. I think that comedy to me is almost like the one, maybe, and maybe something else is out there. I mean, obviously technology leads the way for certain things, but comedy as far as entertainment is the one thing that where you can't put a governor on it because
Yeah.
you need someone out there testing stuff. I mean, the nature of what you do is testing stuff out. You're testing out jokes, but you also need to test
Right.
out whether it's themes, like you said, joking about something that maybe happened, and you're like, oh, okay, maybe a
Right.
little too soon, but eventually you're going to be able to joke about that. Who would have thought that people would have made 9/11 jokes? Back in
Right.
September, back in 2001, people were like, no, 9/11 is off the table
Right.
forever. Family Guy did an episode on it. Now people are making 9/11 jokes. You know what I mean?
It is healing. It's like anything, like grief and trauma. It's comedy is always healing. It identifies that we were all impacted and we were all felt powerless. And once you feel powerless on like a moment like 9/11, you want to regain power by finding ways to both celebrate the memory of it, but also like, hey, we're back because we can laugh at a perspective. And the last thing I'll say about this too is this: when you go, this is what should, can be, and is the most important element of stand up right now. If you want to go up on stage and you want to make a joke about lesbian Filipinos, okay, and you've got 5 minutes about, and it is unadulterated and it is irreverent and not everybody in the room is going to be, but you've got this 5 minute chunk about lesbian Filipinos. Here's what I want to protect. I want a lesbian Filipino to have their show, to kill on their show and respond in whatever way they see the world versus whoever made the first joke. It's an even playing field. Everybody has the ability to get up there and make the joke, but I want to see more opportunities for the butt of the joke to have their moment to get up there and crush with their perspective about
Yeah.
whoever is delivering. That's the most important thing. If everybody has their moment with a mic in their hand, then everybody gets to have their. It's like a great rap battle. It's like Drake Kendrick. It's like
Yeah,
everybody
yeah.
gets to say their piece. That's what comedy should be. Everybody gets to say their piece.
It's funny that you said that because that's like verbalizing what I always say to people because I'm just a big fan of comedy in general, but I always say to me, I can tell someone's a good comedian when I'll give you an example. Ali Wong, Ronnie Chang. I'm like, I am not an Asian female. I've never been. I have 5 kids, but I've never
Breaking
been
news.
pregnant. Yeah, yeah. I have 5 kids, but I've never been pregnant. But I've watched all her stand up sets, and I am crying from laughter, because of the way that she talks about life and nature from her perspective.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. A good storyteller, you don't need to have lived their life or experience. You just need to understand that like we're all the same but different, right?
Yeah,
It's like everybody goes through these same exact kind of tropes in life. We all deal with the same, heartbreak and too much drinking one night, or a kid that drives you crazy, or falling out of like it's we all have that same, but everybody has a unique perspective and everybody has a unique way of like putting their language, and sometimes it's caustic and sometimes it's way too over the top, and we like that. And if you don't like that, then either get up there and say your version, do it,
Yeah.
or go support somebody that speaks to your style of comedy. That's really what everybody should be shouting from the rooftops, is not who should not be saying what, but who they like, who's saying something that they think has value. That's what you should be shouting.
What was your process when you would write your jokes? How long would it take before you were confident to get on stage?
I think that, gosh, that's another interesting question, because I think that, like, I was always pretty confident, and I didn't always have the material, but I knew that I was quick on my feet and had the improv background to be able to, like, go into a school, quickly kind of learn, like, are your team's winning or losing? Who's the teacher that ever, is there any controversy? Is there a rumor about anybody that, like, has taken over the campus? So I would very quickly due diligence, and I could go up there and, rat-a-tat-tat and be like, hey, I heard about Megan, and the whole place would be like, oh, wow, how does he know? He just got here. And so it was fly by night, and then I had some material, obviously, that I've been working on for, 6, 7, 8 years before I was on that college circuit. Once I got into the more successful part of my career with CDs and all that, it's going to a club every night and running a set every night. And for me, it's just adding a piece, adding a tag, adding a button, adding a segue, adding a commentary. Sometimes my style, I like to do a joke,
Yeah.
and then I'll do a little commentary on what I just said, and the commentary is in the moment. So I'll say the joke, I get the laugh, and then the commentary tag is me reading the room and going, okay, now I know some people groaned when I said that, and and then I kind of go into like boom, 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 say something about the groaners, get a real laugh in real time. Then I'm in my next chunk that I've been working on.
I like it. So now we were talking about, you started off doing all the college stuff where a lot of people, not that they weren't doing it, but you were fitting in with that audience. Now, and going back to what we were saying about people being sensitive and stuff, I heard a lot of comedians are mad right now. I don't know if they're doing it right now, but for a while they were like, I'm not doing colleges because they're giving me this list of things not to talk about. Did you have to deal with that?
No, I had dipped out of colleges by the time I hit like a 4-year-long arena run. I didn't go back to colleges because even though, again, it would have been lucrative, it became really, really PC. And it wasn't so much that the students wouldn't have liked the show that I was offering up. Again, I'm not a guy that even came at things like from a really, like, say, aggressive, I don't know, like, vulgar, like that wasn't ever my style anyway. But you could see that the campuses and stuff were getting sensitive, and it was the powers that be that were hiring that kind of ruined the fun for everybody. It was almost like the messenger made the campus, the school, feel like I'm going to get fired and we're going to get in trouble if somebody comes in here and refers to somebody as this or uses too many, F-bombs or who knows what. It just, you felt it. It was the end of that era. If somebody said to me today, like, hey, would you want to do a college? It's still, unfortunately, woke and all that stuff. I hope it's coming back. I don't know. Maybe you'd have to talk to like a young comic who's really like in the guts of it. But from where I'm sitting, I don't think it blends quite yet. I hope it does, but it's not a fun era to be a comic and have to be so safe there.
Right. I feel it'll come back. Everything goes in cycles.
I hope.
And like that like that guy said, men are back. So maybe eventually
men are back.
Men are back, baby. We're back. Okay, so let's talk.
You're gonna see a muscle on screen again. That's except for The Rock. I mean, The Rock has always been The Rock. But yeah, you're gonna finally see the dudes are back. But
all right, let's talk about lessons learned. Like good, bad. Would you change anything during your career?
I think I got pretty lucky that some of my mistakes, some of the missteps probably early in my career, when I break through and you've got not only ego, but you've got insecurity because there's a lot of jealousy when you break through, and there's a lot of people that want you to fail. There's a lot of, unfortunately, comedy is also, even though it's more cohesive and together and entrepreneurial, it's still very competitive. It's more a team sport than it used to be. but my era, especially, it was really not. And so I found myself, if you not so much regrets, but when I look at like places that I had my guard really up because I felt it. I felt like there was a lot of animosity that I was kind of like the guy that got the sword on the head of like you are comedy. For a little while, it
Yeah.
was like Dane Cook is comedy, and so I've had the good fortune of sitting and building up friendships with people that either did me dirty and kind of came at me because they didn't like that I was out front, and then also people that I probably was not fair with or shut out because I was both cocky and not wanting to um, be taken down from a perch that I felt like existed, but
Right.
also that fear of like, hey man, if I show my sensitivity, which I have, then they're going to clobber me and they're going to take this away from me. So the regret, I guess, is I wish some of the people that I befriended in relationships I wish that I had gone to them or they had come to me sooner so we could be allies. I think I could
Mhm.
have done even greater things with some of my cohorts. But unfortunately, either I push them or they push me away because you think somebody's something else in a moment when really I'm the same guy. It's just a lot of noise around me, right?
Right.
So that's one thing. Um, I wish that I had gone. I'd almost right around 2004 or five gone to film school, and I regret it. I wish that I had taken a little time and not done so many gigs because I wanted to learn the language of filmmaking because I'd
Mhm.
eventually like to be producing, and I'm producing a film now that I get to all the stuff that the knowledge that I took, I get to pour in and have great collaborators. But I'm like, man, I could know so much more about the verbiage if I had educated myself earlier. And
Right.
so I was too busy being, you know, on top and cool cars and a lot of the silliness that goes along with feeling like you're a super or something. And I could have been doing more to educate myself at that point.
I feel like everybody goes through everything you said is very relatable because anybody who's at least succeeded at what they've done, they've had moments where they're like, okay, this person's just trying to take something from me. And then they think back and go, man, I should have helped them out a little bit. Or,
Yeah.
I should have learned this at this time, but I was too nervous about losing this. I
Yeah.
mean,
Well, now I get to be, Ramiro, like now I get to be like, I'm the old bull and I'm a mentor. And I've come up with so many young comics that I guess like I get to, whatever they call that, like my moment that I'm in now, this beautiful, this moment of goodwill and sharing success with not only comics of my graduating class, but mistakes of my past, sins of my youth. Now I get to be a voice for a lot of comedians and artists coming up that rely on me to be like, they like me because I'm Boston assertive, which means I don't bullshit you ever.
right,
I don't care if you don't like what I'll tell you. I don't even care if you end our relationship because I'm truthful with you. I'm willing to be so honest that in 5 years, and this has happened, somebody comes back to me 5 years later and goes, you know what? I didn't want to hear it at the time, but man, you were more honest with me than I could have imagined, and I want to, rebuild things. So I bring that. I bring a real honesty, and if I tell you I think something's great, again, it's just my opinion. It's one opinion, but people know I'm a harbinger of truth. I want to build you up. I want to see you succeed, and I don't think there's any better example of that. Is I knew Matt Rife when he was 15 years old. The
really.
first show he ever came to at Nationwide Arena was me. His mom took him at 15 years old. He came to my show. He writes me an email after. We become email buddies. And he says he wants to be a comedian. And I say to him in an email, I have the email, by the way. I say, all right, listen, finish school and then come out to LA. But you got to finish school. You got to graduate. And then come out to LA. And I said, there's a place called the Laugh Factory. And I'm sure on a weekday night, if I'm not on tour, I'll be upstairs sitting in a booth with a terrible leopard print. You'll find me there. Come find me when you graduate. He walks in at whatever, 17 years old. I'm sitting upstairs at the Laugh Factory. And this kid who looks like a toad, this skinny little prick who looks like a fucking toad, walks up with his big lips, and he's like, "All right, I'm here." And I said, "All right, you graduated? Yep, okay. All right, here's the game plan. It's real simple. You got to come out here. You got to get on stage as much as humanly possible over the course of the next couple of months." Little skinny Matt Rife comes out. One night he goes, "Is that Dave Chappelle?" I go, "Yeah." And he's like, "Will you introduce me?" I bring him over. I have a picture. It's somewhere here. My very first picture he ever took. He's literally, I got to post this picture later. He's standing next to Dave with his big lips and his little skinny fucking body. Next to Dave, little toad Matt Rife, before he became this handsome fucking prince. He was this little toad. And I took this picture with him and Chappelle. And then over the years, man, I got to not only build up, I love him, you know, he's like my little brother, build up a rapport, get to watch him not only figure it out, because you can only help so much, because they got to figure it out themselves. Then he's opening for me in 2018 and 19. He's on the Tell Like It Is tour. He's featuring. We're flying around. I'm bringing him on like private planes, and I helicoptered him with it to a gig together. And at one point I remember he goes, "Man, I hope I can have all this." And I said to him, I go, "Dude," I go, "you're going to be like the Justin Bieber of comedy." I said it. You're coming into it, man. I go, "You lean into this thing you're doing with social media." I said, "You're going to have the biggest comedy moment." And I sat the other night at the Hollywood Bowl with his mom. Talk about full circle.
Yeah.
I sat in the audience with his mom, and we watched his son perform at the Hollywood Bowl in front of 17,000 people.
No shit.
That's my proudest stuff. Now, I love my career and I love work, but I love being able to see people. You know, he was scared and he was broken and he was, down and out 2 years ago. I lent him a couple $100 one night at the club because he was like, "Man, I can't fill rooms. I can't do anything. I'm on this one show on MTV, but they don't pay me. They don't this, that, and the other." And it was very emotional to be able to sit there and with his mom, who took him to my show, and watch him kill it at the Hollywood Bowl.
So you're in the mentor role now of your career, because a lot of times coming up, it's like you have somebody who you're checking in with, and you're the mentee, and then you hit it where now you're pulling people along, and that
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
And also too, because I had a couple of great mentors coming up, especially some Boston, cronies. But the truth is, and it's public record. Like, I got a lot of shit, man. I got a lot of people that, a lot of people I even admired, like took swipes at me and kicked. And I made a promise to myself. I said, "Man, I'm going to take this to the moon, but I'm going to be good to people. I'm never going to treat people, maybe I wasn't always, listen, hey, when there's no playbook and you break through and you get to that place like rare air, it's a little scary, because really you're like, how do I stay here? Some people don't want me here. You're fighting for your life just to prove that you belong there. And so it comes with a lot of bullshit. And I was like, man, if I can ever do something to just help somebody alleviate that part when you make it, because the moment you make it, there's a lot of people that come in and go, "Okay, let's deconstruct this person. Let's ruin them. Let's out their secrets. Let's say that they're terrible. Let's say they're a racist. And they want to, that's the story." And so to be able to now at this point, 34 years in, go like, I'll never not be a voice of, my only goal is to help you keep your integrity. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. I don't tell you how to be funny. I don't know that. I don't know how to tell people anything other than do what is in your heart, in your gut. And I try to help insulate and keep your integrity and make it the way you want to make it. And don't worry about all these haters and all the people that come out of the woodwork that just want your sparkle. They just want your sparkle.
Yep. Learning from other people's mistakes. Another big lesson.
Yeah. Learning from my own, learning from other people's, and then just paying it forward, man. And just, we got one life. We got one go round. I get to do the greatest job on earth, 3 decades later, making people laugh. I got a huge tour coming up. I'm going to be going all over the U.S. and then eventually the world. We're already playing in London, Abu Dhabi wants me to do a show. I'm in this huge upswing, and to be able to celebrate it, especially this week, Netflix around Chappelle and everybody's backstage, and it's just been an incredible celebration for stand-up comedy happening in real time right now, and I can't wait to see what's next. I'm excited.
Yeah, so you just did the Netflix show yesterday. My boy Connor sent me clips of it. He was in the audience. Big shout out to Connor. You're gonna play a dragon in this movie.
I know, dude. I love that guy. What a great group. What a great gang.
He's actually a really good kid. I call him. I always say another Malcolm Gladwell book. I forget which one it was. Maybe What the Dog Saw. I forget, but he talks about connectors. He said, there was another guy when Paul Revere was telling everybody the British are coming. There was another guy doing the same thing, going the opposite route, but nobody paid attention to the other guy because nobody knew who the fuck he was, but everyone knew Paul Revere. He was a connector. And I always say to Connor, I go, dude, you're a connector, because he's always hitting me up randomly going, hey, I know this guy. Do you want him for the podcast? Hey, this guy can help you out with this. Hey, he's just very, I told him, I said, I don't even know, like, he wants to produce a Marvel movie eventually. That's his goal. But I said, no matter what you do, you're going to be successful just because of your work ethic and because you have that connector thing in you, as opposed to being like, no, it's all about me,
Yeah, no, he's tremendously talented. His passion is wafting off of him, and that was something that attracted me right away. I knew that having worked with Lasseter and Disney, having voiced something before, I was like, oh, this is a place that I could also be of service, because it was like, hey guys, I'm on your ride. You're asking me to, produce and be a part of it. But the reality is, you're on the come up. You guys are on the come up. I'm just here to try to, bring value and show you, hey, these are some of the things that you may not know about this particular side of the industry. But I will tell you, his determination, but also what he's already accomplished with, arguably very little, is, I've seen this trend. I've seen the way this goes. And if he keeps his wits about him and he lives a healthy life, I think he has the potential to, to have many tigers by the tail in his career.
Yeah, you're noticing the pattern. So okay, so you have you're producing a movie too right now. You said, right?
Yeah, I want so badly to say what it is, but we don't. We'll do a deadline drop and an official trade drop. But the thing I'm most excited is it's an ensemble comedy. It's kind of I can say this, it's kind of in a Hangover old school vibe.
Okay.
With me in an ensemble. But what I'm excited about is the script was a blacklist script. If you know anything about Hollywood, there's a bunch of scripts every year that are called blacklist, and they're considered the best scripts of the year, and many of them get financed and made. This was a blacklist comedy script that, for reasons that I don't want to get into because I don't want to give too much away, didn't get its moment, and we were fortunate enough to get it. So I have an incredible script. It's a part that if you love my other films, it's kind of a nice addition, and I get to produce it, and hopefully in the next couple of weeks we can say what the title is and what the premise. But I'll say this, ready? And it plays into it. Guys are back. Men are back.
Yes, men are back. All this time I knew I was working out for a reason. All right, well, Dane, I appreciate you coming on, man. I really do. Thank you so much, and good luck with with everything you're doing. You're doing great right now, so keep it up.
Thanks, man. Ramiro, thank you. Hey, listen, great success with the new element, the new podcast. And hopefully when I come back through, you guys can come out and check out the show. Also got a big Boston announcement that is not a part of the current tour schedule. So the Fresh New Flavor Tour, September to December, tickets at danecook.com. It's a Live Nation tour across the board. But I got a big Boston surprise. And if you stay close and follow me online or whatever socials, I think we're going to be talking very soon, and people are going to be fucking blown away at what I'm about to do back in Beantown.
Can't wait. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it.
All right. Cheers, man. Thank you, bud.
Have a great one.